Nashville Predators training camp is officially here, and there's no shortage of storylines to watch, including Barry Trotz putting every player on his roster on notice, and some potential clues as to how Andrew Brunette might handle some of the younger Preds. Today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, available to you wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as always, I want to start out with a special hello to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys. We appreciate the support you give us week after week. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at InsideThePreds.com.
Also want to mention today's episode brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase Medical case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. So get yours today at jasemedical.com, JASEmedical.com. And it's finally here. The Nashville Predators are back in the building, baby.
It's like hockey Christmas. Merry Hockey Christmas, everyone.
Hockmas.
It's Hockmas. Merry Hockmas, everyone.
Yeah. Hocknaka?
Happy Hanukkah. Oh my gosh, I feel like we're on a roll with this.
We are. We should just end the episode right here.
We're not going to, we've peaked.
Yeah.
We've absolutely peaked.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and all that good jazz. The Nashville Predators officially report to training camp today. Their first practice is going to be tomorrow. This is the first chance for everybody to kind of be in the same building, under the same roof for the first time, really, Anne. Since Andrew Brunette and Barry Trotz have taken over reins of the Nashville Predators. And there's going to be a lot of, I think, interesting things to watch with this team early within the first couple of days of camp.
Yeah, there are so many storylines unfolding. Whole new chapter, a new book for the Nashville Predators. And in this new book, there are so many different subplots to keep an eye on. You know, you've got new head coach Andrew Brunette. What are his systems going to look like? How is he going to utilize, some players like we talked about yesterday? How is Roman Josi going to be utilized? We've got new veterans that have come in via free agency. How is all that going to unfold? We have a crop of young players that Nashville has been really excited to see in this young youth movement roster reset. Is that really what's going to happen this season? So there's a lot to watch. And like you said, we don't have to wait for a preseason game. We don't have to wait for opening night. It's going to be interesting to watch the minute practice starts tomorrow at Fordyce Center.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds like a lot of different players are going to get a lot of chances to play in a lot of different spots. I'm sure some young players are going to get a chance to play up with Phil Forsberg, maybe Ryan O'Reilly. I'm sure, there's going to be a rotation of right-handed defenders and maybe take a few drills with Roman Josi just to see if there's somebody there to unlock chemistry. The biggest thing to me, Anne, is just the competition that seems to be brewing out throughout camp. Especially when you hear these comments from Barry Trotz. These came out this morning ahead of players reporting to camp on NashvillePredators.com. Basically, he just said everybody coming to camp has a lot to prove, talked about very limited time, talked about, players' ceilings and competition. And so it kind of sounds like he's talking about, you have this crop of young players coming in. You have some older veterans, not just the likes of like Kiefer Sherwood and Cole Smith and, Mark Jankowski and some of these players who have been on the team a while, have just kind of been fringe players for a while. But maybe even a player like Yakov Trenin or, Dante Fabro or Jeremy Lauzon, players who have had spots that are now fighting to keep them. And especially with, a new coach and a new GM, this kind of feels like Barry Trotz just throwing, his book in the air and being like, you know what, blank slate.
Yes.
Saros is our number one. Josi is our top defender. Philip Forsberg's on the top line. Everybody else, you're going to play for your spot to see where you land.
Absolutely agree with you. When you're looking at what Barry Trotz has said going into this training camp, there are only 3 players who can quote Vivian Ward from Pretty Woman and say, I'm a sure thing. Josi, Saros, and Forsberg. Those are your sure things. Did they pay a lot of money to bring in a serial winner like Ryan O'Reilly? Yes, they did. But Ryan O'Reilly even, there is nobody who is going to be handed a thing in this training camp. And I think that this is a different feel, not just because it's a different coach, different systems, different roster, but it sort of has felt like the last couple of seasons, you just knew who was going to get the top minutes because there wasn't anybody else to get the top minutes,
right.
And not to take away from those players, but really, there were a lot of players that could go into training camp feeling very comfortable about the fact that, like, look, I'm a top guy. I'm a top guy. I'm going to get top line minutes. This is not the case at this training camp. And Barry Trotz has made it very clear this is not the case.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like I remember last year going at camp, there was only one real question, and that was who's going to be on that second line wing alongside Niederreiter and Johansson. That was really kind of the only battle. Everybody, it was kind of coming in, and, we talked about, the chemistry from the year before didn't work out, obviously. So now, you're getting a chance to kind of reset the deck a little bit. And it's going to be interesting because some of these players are going to have to bring their A games. We're going to talk specifically about the younger players coming up in just a second, but we talked about the logjam on defense, and there's 7 guys who you could consider like every game NHL defenseman last year. There's 6 spots on your blue line, so there's going to be somebody used to playing, being an everyday defender that's going to be on the bench. And that's going to fuel a lot of guys because there's a lot of players, like Dante Fabro and Alexander Carrier who are playing on 1-year deals. It's going to be up to them to be like, I'm part of this team. Training camp is your chance to hit the ground running and prove it. How much have you worked out in the offseason? How much have you really honed in on what Andrew Brunette wants to do? Like, this is your first impression. And there's, with this competition, there's no room to kind of ease into it. You got to hit the ground running.
Yeah, we've talked about this defense. How is this all going to play out? They're all on notice. Short of Roman Josi, every defenseman is coming into this camp with something to prove, with something that they have to do to earn their spot. And I think it's interesting because, like you said, we've got 7 NHL starting defensemen. But you also in the wings have Spencer Stastny. You have Jake Livingstone. What do the Nashville Predators need to see from them that may make them be, the first call-ups? Is there something that these young guys could show that really could pressure somebody like Dante Fabro or Alexander Carrier? Yeah. Experience in the NHL is super valuable, but everybody is coming in and they have to prove it this training camp. It's a prove it day tomorrow.
Yeah, and not just, Stastny and Livingstone knocking on the door, but hey, like Jordan Gross and Roland McCown, they're also going to be fighting to try to be like that first call up from Milwaukee. So, yeah, I mean, it just seems like there's so many opportunities up and down the lineup, even like some of like the next man up call ups. So this is going to be just kind of not just an interesting camp, but an interesting start to the year, Ann, because there's a lot of people going to be fighting for every inch, every spot on that depth chart that may swing like who's on this team in, a couple of months from now. And it's going to be crazy to watch. Another big thing to watch is going to be the young players on the Nashville Predators. We have talked for months and months and months about them kind of being the future of the team. How is Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette going to handle the competition among those players, the Evangelistas and Tomasinos of the world? maybe some hints, maybe some stuff we don't necessarily like. We'll talk about that coming up in just a second. But first, want to mention today's episode, again, brought to you by Jace Medical. Folks, if you've lived through the past 4 or 5 years, there's a lot of unexpected stuff that pops up. We had COVID. We've had some supply chain shortages. We've had, stories about people getting caught overseas without, access to some of their medicine and stuff, stranded for days. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved one during the unexpected. And that's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have that medication in hand at all times. Jace Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication, delivery, ongoing consultation and care. So don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. All right, Ann, we are talking about the Nashville Predators reporting to training camp today, aka Wednesday, in case you're listening to this a couple of days from now. And there are no shortage of storylines to watch. One thing that everyone has kind of been excited for this camp, Ann, is looking at some of the younger players on this Nashville Predators team.
Yeah, and I love what Barry Trotz said in this article that we've been kind of referencing in this episode. Emma Lingan wrote it for the Predators. Great piece. Encourage you to go read it. Couple of things that jumped out at me that Barry Trotz shared. He talked a little bit about the last season's, end of the season run by these young players. And he kind of talked about how it may not have been his choice. A lot of people felt like after the trade deadline, look, the Nashville Predators need to crash and burn and move up in the draft lottery. And this is what he had to say about what happened. He said, that is a player's choice. Trotz said, it wasn't my choice or an organizational choice. That was a cultural player's choice. They could have given up and they didn't. I love the fact that there was no quit. There was no, oh, woe is me feeling after we moved a number of good players. What it was a sense of resilience, a sense of culture. So this really amazing level of praise for what these young players were able to do, kind of the embracing the opportunity, which is, again, something that all these Predators are going to have to do come training camp, embrace the opportunity. But on the other hand, my friend, in this same article, I don't know what to make of what Barry Trotz has to say when he talks about these young players, because he talks about, like, look, if you are a young player and you don't have all of the tools in your toolbox to compete at the NHL level, then, the NHL, he says, is unforgiving in taking your confidence away.
Yeah. And he went on to say, like, that's why they got Ryan O'Reilly. Mm-hmm. Here's like the thing that I think you and I both kind of looked at each other when we were reading this article. He said, it's important that we get Ryan O'Reilly so Cody Glass doesn't have to go head to head against like Connor McDavid in all 82 games. That's going to eat your confidence. But the thing is, Ann, Cody Glass did go against Connor McDavid last year. And like when he was matched up, that was like David's like worst game against the Preds. Like that was the one where like he and Draisaitl didn't score 5 games. And that was like the game that we said, oh, wow, Cody Glass is like kind of proven himself right now. Like to me, it's a balance.
Yes.
Like, yeah, you do want, somebody like Ryan O'Reilly because like him having some defensive responsibilities is a good thing because he's a very good defensive center. And we mentioned there's a lot of players when they first get called up, maybe they don't have the defensive awareness. Like maybe they are, kind of getting run circles around by older players like, a Connor McDavid. But at the same time, you do need them to go head to head against them sometimes. That's how you're going to test like where you are as a team, like, where your confidence is at, like, what's your like defensive mentality, like that to me is a big thing. We saw that with Cody Glass last year. As soon as he started getting top line minutes, as soon as he started being a guy that went out there against some of the other teams' top lines, that is when we first took notice. And it's like, I think the Preds have something here. Maybe, even if Cody Glass doesn't develop into like 100-point scorer, at least they have like a really good, responsible two-way forward, maybe
right.
a little bit here. And that's kind of, I kind of keep like thinking back, and, that's how you prove like that your players are ready to go. Like, give them some shifts against these top guys. And, hey, if it doesn't work out, then okay, it doesn't work out. You can kind of readjust, maybe add a Ryan O'Reilly to the line to kind of handle, that part down. We heard about this, when you have like UC Saros in the back. Why it was important to keep UC Saros is because, you can have some players make mistakes and not see like goals pile up, but you have to kind of put them out there though, right, Ann? Because otherwise, if you're like, it's like 2-3 years down the road and you're too scared to put your, top players, your up and coming prospects on the ice against some of the top guys in the NHL, then what's the point of having them?
Yeah. And for me, it all comes back to a conversation about that word confidence. Because do you gain confidence by going up against a Connor McDavid? And look, if you're going up against Connor McDavid as a young player, you're going to get beat at some point in time. But again, Cody Glass looked really great against Connor McDavid. He's kind of the barometer for like, where are you in the NHL? Well, did okay against Connor McDavid. But what does it do for a young player's confidence to say, hey, you're not ready to go up against some of the top players, and so we're going to hold you back? I would be so curious to talk to Cody Glass, to Phil Tomasino, who had some NHL time and then spent a lot more time in the AHL developing. What did that do for their confidence? I mean, obviously it's a tough blow initially, but long term, how do you grow confidence in these young players? And can Barry Trotz find the balance of, you're going to grow confidence by putting him in there and giving them a chance versus, hey, we're going to hold you back. We're going to hold you back so that you don't lose confidence. Like, I don't know. And in reading this, it makes you think, how much faith does Trotz have in these young players? If he's saying, hey, you know what, we may not put them in the really hard situations right out of the gate. How does that work? How do you build confidence? Yeah. And how do you not take away confidence by saying you're not ready?
Well, we had that same thing last year with Cody Glass.
Yeah.
Remember? And to a lesser extent, like Ellie Tolvanen too, because it would be like, they would be on the ice, skating along, making some good plays early. And then like in the, end of the, or start of the second period, they would, make a mistake and, give up a goal, and, they would take them out and be like, well, hey, we don't want you to get shaken up, so we're just not going to play you for 3 games until you get your confidence back. And it's like, well, what's that?
Yeah.
And then does that help? And then from a team standpoint, like, is it any better putting Cole Smith like in that same spot?
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, that was the first player like I could think of, but like if Cole Smith makes like mistake after mistake, like what's the point? Like if I mean, to me, it's like, I'm not going to jump to conclusions about like one clip, because maybe like I do understand what Trotz is saying here. Like, hey, you just want to take like some pressure off some of your young players so they don't have the weight of the world on their shoulders entering camp. But at the same time, it's like, okay, if this is going to be the same thing where we're treating our younger players with kids' gloves, that's not good. Like, like you got to throw them in the fire a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a totally different season if you continue to develop these young players. And there's a lot of young players, if you continue to kind of let them extra marinate, that becomes a very different looking season than I think Nashville Predators fans are anticipating this year. So I think this is something to keep an eye on.
There's another side to this too. We've talked about all the young players. We talked about some of the
Mhm.
new players coming in. One group of people we haven't really talked about, Anne, is some of the veteran players still fighting for spots on this team. Are there going to be roles for them coming up in camp? We're going to talk about that in just a second as well.
First, want to let you know this episode's brought to you by our friends at, of course, FanDuel. It is not just the NHL season kicking off, but we are already into the NFL season. It has been glorious. 2 weeks in, loving every minute of it. And you can snap into action with the NFL season with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. Look, the app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that you can choose from, including spreads, players, props. You can check over, under, tons of different bets you can place at FanDuel. So go there, visit fanduel.com/locked on and kick off the NFL season. Again, check out fanduel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
All right, Ann. So we've talked about some of the younger players fighting for spots on the team. We've talked about new guys coming in. The other group that we haven't really talked about a lot is that there's kind of a lot of holdovers from last year's team. These were kind of like, the fringe NHL guys who, were kind of, destined for Milwaukee, wound up playing some minutes, wound up playing, a role in the team. We're talking about like Mark Jankowski, Cole Smith, Michael McCarron, Kiefer Sherwood. There's even some new players, kind of on the team like Jasper Weatherby and Dennis Gurionov, sort of these guys that came in for, veterans minimum, but have some NHL experience that are going to be fighting for spots. And this is interesting, Anne, because these are guys, we're talking about, is there room for, some of these younger players on the team? Let's not forget that these are some veteran players that are also going to be fighting for spots on the team as well. Things like, maybe fourth line, maybe the extra skater, maybe some penalty killing minutes.
Yeah. And I think, as much as we talk about Cody Glass and Ryan O'Reilly and who's the 1C and who's going to play wing with Philip Forsberg and all of this, which is interesting, I think the most interesting battles that are going to happen in training camp are going to be that bottom six, like you're talking about, because there is such a wealth of players to draw from. Are the bottom six going to be your guys with NHL experience? You mentioned like a Michael McCarron. Are you going to be looking at a Cole Smith? Are you going to be looking at kind of that more physical, bigger, traditional fourth line kind of thing? A Yakov Trenin? Or is the bottom six for the Nashville Predators this season going to be the place where some of these young guys that we would ideally love to see in the top six, is this going to be where they marinate this season? Are we going to see Luke Evangelista in the bottom six? Are we going to see Juuso Parssinen in the bottom six? These are players that I think Nashville Predators fans want to see get a lot of ice time. So how is Andrew Brunette going to use that bottom six? Is he going to value, NHL experience? Is he going to go with kind of that traditional size, physicality? Or is the bottom six going to be totally different this season? And is that going to be where some of these players marinate? Is it not going to be, hey, you're either going to make the top six in Nashville or you're going to the AHL? Could the bottom six be where the marinating happens? I think it's going to be fascinating to see what he does.
Yeah, I would say a lot of it kind of depends on, like Andrew Brunette and how he rolls out some of these lines. We talked about John Hines and the line identity, the two scoring lines, and then like your third line was the herd line. And then you had this, fourth line, checking energy line. Is Andrew Brunette going to kind of change things around and be like, maybe we do three lines, kind of like three, scoring lines and maybe a flex line. Or, we just kind of do what the Seattle Kraken did last year and try to just roll out like four, kind of evenly matched lines and just, kind of destroy teams with depth. Seattle did that very well last year. Had 13 players with 30 or more points last season. So that's something that, we'll have to watch. And that may swing a few things, because there's certainly some spots. I would say if you're talking about the bottom six, the only certainty is going to be that Colton Sissons is going to hold one of those center spots somewhere. Yes. The else is, somebody like Yakov Trenin could move up or down the lineup depending on what that strategy is, and that may hinge some things as well.
Yeah. Another thing that I really want to keep an eye on, and this is off ice, that I think is going to be interesting in training camp, and I think it's going to be a storyline to watch, is we've talked so much about these younger players and their opportunities and gaining confidence off ice, but how is this new veteran core going to come together? You've got Josi Forsberg, you've got Saros, a couple of the veterans who really led the team down the stretch were Colton Sissons, Ryan McDonough. But, you're bringing in Ryan O'Reilly and Gus Nyquist. These guys have got a ton of experience. Luke Schenn, won some Stanley Cups. So how are all of these guys going to come together, and how long is it going to take them to kind of make a cohesive veteran culture? They contacted each other early on. When we heard from Ryan O'Reilly and Gus Nyquist, they're like, hey, we've already been chatting with some of, with Josi and with Forsberg and some of these people. And I think that that's really great, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see, how do these veterans work together to create one culture in the locker room that's not only going to be effective on the ice for wins and losses, but effective off the ice for these young players. And I think this is something that's going to be really interesting to keep an eye on off ice.
Yeah, and especially because it seems like the big theme of the offseason was culture.
Culture.
Barry Trotz said that word so many times, and he wanted to change the culture. And to me, it's going to kind of be interesting, as some of these roster battles shape up, like let's say Ryan McDonough just doesn't have it anymore. Well, that's somebody you still obviously want to keep in the locker room.
Right.
And, hey, the trade deadlines and stuff are coming up. Tyson Barrie has been, everybody talks about him being such an important part, of kind of keeping morale in the locker room upbeat and kind of taking younger players under his wing when he came over last year. You don't necessarily want to trade him either. So I'm kind of curious to see if maybe culture shapes some of these, some of these roster decisions, because if that's the case, maybe somebody like Michael McCarron does have a spot on this team, at least as an extra forward, just because he's somebody that's been around. He knows a lot of the AHL guys, knows a lot of the NHL guys.
Right.
Maybe that's, if that's kind of the direction you're going with, maybe an argument for keeping somebody like him on the team.
Yeah, I think so much of the decisions that happen on ice are going to be impacted by things off ice, things like confidence that we've talked about, things like culture. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. This is a whole different Nashville Predators team. Yes, you still have your kind of foundational players in Josi, Forsberg, and Saros, but so much is different. And I think what happens off ice and how this team comes together and really sets a new tone in the locker room is going to impact some things on ice too. So definitely something I want to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's other players like Kiefer Sherwood. Maybe they have a higher ceiling and kind of can pick up where they off last year too. A lot of intriguing storylines, I think, with the veterans. And so this is going to be something close to watch for the next couple of days. Tomorrow is the first practice for the Nashville Predators. We're going to be talking about some of the players to watch, continue that series, and then we will get an update from Ann Kimmel, who's going to be at the first couple practices. So you will provide your insight coming up later this week as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to do that. In the meantime, you can follow my work at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on Twitter X. It's the only way I can say it that makes me not feel uncomfortable, at ANK_mama on ice.
Yeah. whatever it is.
Whatever
You
it
can
is.
find me there at _NS Morgan or read my work at penaltyboxradio.com. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow with an all-new episode. See you then.